Polypharmacy. What is that? You'd be surprised. It's a concept that touches many of our lives, but even I didn't realize that this term existed. Join me this week as I sit down with pharmacist John Moro and we talk about what polypharmacy is and how his work is changing this for the future. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women to live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering holistic solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I'm so excited for today's conversation. I am joined by John Moro. Welcome to the show, John.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
So tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll get started here. So I'm John Moro. I am a recovering pharmacist that is practicing in an herbal space that does not have any pharmaceuticals. And currently I work and own the Herbal Path Natural Pharmacy. We have 2 locations, one in Dover, one in Portsmouth. And it's a really interesting space that is also very educational. So I find that educating the public is a passion of mine and always has been, regardless of what field I've belonged to. So being a part of the Herbal Path is a way to continue to educate and empower people. And I said I was a recovering pharmacist because I did practice for a number of years in conventional medicine. And while I was working in conventional medicine, I saw a lot and grew progressively more and more demoralized, dispirited, and discouraged, because the reason why I went into medicine to begin with was to help people. Number one reason. And I think in healthcare, most of us would say that's why we went into it.
Absolutely.
And I think that the further along I went, I always believed that, okay, the further I go, the higher I climb the ladder of corporate pharmacy, the more good I'll be able to do for people. But what I found was something shocking to me. It was the opposite. The further I went, the more I had to conform and fit it in box. And to come out of that box and to be operating through the sense of empowerment and autonomy, helping people, not having to worry about meeting quotas or script count. It's a beautiful thing to really, truly be able to devote your being and energy to helping other people. So that is, I think, a core concept of what we prioritize at the Herbal Path. And then it's also expanding awareness. As time has gone on, I've learned more and more about the connection that we used to have with the earth and how important it is to sit with the plants and learn about herbs and learn about the environment, right? Because we're all interconnected. We're part of a biological system. And I think that medicine as a whole, especially the experience I had, was very machine-like. So there's a machine-like quality to conventional medicine. And I also want to say for everyone listening that I'm not anti-conventional medicine. I'm going to say some things today that might be shocking or just, wow, I can't believe he said that. But none of it is meant to be disparaging over the practitioners that are working in conventional medicine. I have the utmost respect for them. And I believe if they knew different ways of doing things, they may choose those, right? But there is a machine-like quality in conventional medicine that most people are familiar with, that experience. Practitioners certainly know it, but patients know it too. Going to the doctor, for example, going through the insurance, take a number, wait some more. Oh, this 3 medications get prescribed to you because you have a blood pressure that is within this specific parameter, and we give everyone the same medicines, right? So it's almost like a cookie cutter
Mm-hmm.
approach. So there's that, the machine-like quality, and that's what I experienced when I was in conventional medicine. And that really provided the impetus to leave, to
Mm-hmm.
seek something different. And working at the Herbal Path right now, I love the fact that I get to work alongside people that just are really into herbs. There's some herbalists that we have. And I didn't know what an herbalist was when I was in pharmacy school. I had no clue that was a type of practitioner that was just so knowledgeable about plants and the world around us. And now, working at the Herbal Path, I get to work with them on a daily basis, which is quite an honor and a privilege. So moving into this field, I feel like it gave me a new lease on life. And that's why I'm so excited about it. And I believe that there are things that if people knew, they might be able to be healthier, and they might be able to lead healthier lives and maybe stave off the burden of chronic disease. Because we were saying earlier, right? One of the biggest challenges facing us is chronic disease. 7.5% of the population in 1940 of America had some form of chronic disease. And when I say chronic disease, I mean something like cardiovascular disease, high cholesterol, cancer, arthritis, things like that. So 7.5% way back when. Today, 60% of the American population, possibly more because the statistic was from 2024, so it's probably a little bit higher now, but back then, 60% of the American population had at least one chronic disease. And you think to yourself, wow, yes, that's a lot of time, but there's a burden that comes along with having these diseases. And certainly practicing in conventional medicine for about 8 years or so, I saw the burden that they can have on people's lives, on people's families. And I'm just excited that we get to work in a space where we can help people differently. And it's not about trying to treat or cure, it's about education and empowerment. That's really what we're all about. So I'm
So
excited to be here today and to talk to you.
I was going to say, so now you can all see why I have John on the show, right? I met John a few years ago and we just clicked, and we've followed each other in professional circles for quite a number of years now. And we always have these really rich conversations around topics exactly like this. And I was like, oh, John, like we've got to do a podcast. Well, and as we started having a conversation, we might do several podcasts because John is a wealth of information. And I love that he brings that marriage of conventional wisdom, right? Having worked in that model, having seen how that model works, how it is or is not, or a combination thereof, serving people. And then the work that he stepped into now at the Herbal Path, it's a place and a practice. I'm going to call it a practice because they do such a beautiful job at educating the public about what will work for their body, being able to help inform them to the point where they're like, oh, there isn't just a pill for a symptom. There's a sophisticated, biointelligent symphony at play here that requires attention in
Mhm.
multiple ways, or this one thing could address several things rather than, and this is the topic that I brought John on for, this idea of polypharmacy. Now, I've seen this concept over and over in my practice when people come in for their initial intake and they send me their medication list. And I'm like, wow, this is a long list of things. And I didn't realize until I started talking to John that there was an actual term for this concept and just how deep it goes. So, John, can you tell us a little bit about what polypharmacy is?
Sure. So it's had a couple different definitions. The most commonly accepted one is 5 or more maintenance medicines per day. So these are things that are taken on a regular basis. They're prescription medications. They are not, oh, I'm going to use an antibiotic for a 10-day course, right? There are things like beta blockers for heart disease, anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants, anticholinergics, but there is something that needs to be taken on a daily basis. And so one of the commonly accepted definitions of polypharmacy is 5 or more maintenance prescriptions per day. That definition used to be different. It used to be 3. And then at some point in time, it was lengthened to 5. And I think it's because it's becoming more of a normal thing. The average number of prescriptions that people are on in this country right now is 4 per day, right? So 4 prescriptions per day. And it's not saying necessarily that prescriptions are bad. And I'm certainly not against prescription medication by any means. What I am against is the overutilization of prescription medication. So that's one part of the definition. But another part of the definition is the cascade that comes with it. And that's, I think, what I think of when polypharmacy comes to mind. And I'll give you a very common example. There's a medication class out there that really is not supposed to be used unless under extenuating circumstances for greater than 8 weeks at a time. And it's called proton pump inhibitors, right? And these are things like Nexium, Protonix, pantoprazole. These medicines work by shutting down acid pumps or proton pumps in the stomach and changing gastric pH, right? By changing gastric pH, you can actually change your ability to absorb minerals and to process vitamins. So there can be unintended consequences of shutting down acid production long term. In the short term, they work for heartburn. But here's what happens, right? So somebody gets on this, and maybe they're prescribed it in a hospital visit. It's very commonly that acid production goes up when you're bedridden in a hospital, an ER visit. So you get a proton pump inhibitor, and then, you recover, you get out there again, you're in society, you go to your doctor's visit, just an annual checkup. The doctor reviews, the med list. Oh, you're taking Protonix right now, right? Yeah, I am. I'm not sure why. Okay. Would you like a refill? I'll send it to the nearest pharmacy. So you see how easy it is for these things to get carried over, right? Now, what happens is there's unfortunately an increased risk of osteoporosis and bone problems when you take these medicines long term.
Makes sense.
And that's something that's a little more commonly understood now than a few years ago. So now you add that, and let's say I'm on this medicine, I get a DEXA scan or a bone scan, and unfortunately, I've got osteoporosis or I've got osteopenia. The doctor may say, well, maybe we could try some Fosamax. It's a medicine for your bones. It could help to strengthen your bones, but we're going to try it. So now we're on that. Now, what can Fosamax do? Well, one of the side effects can be upset stomach, because all medicines have side effects, right? And that's really where polypharmacy can be disruptive. It's not necessarily what the medicines are doing for their main action. It's the side effects that they're having in your body, right? So now I'm on this medicine. I'm trying to build my bones, but my stomach is queasy. I'm not feeling so good. That's okay. There's some anti-nausea medication, right? So I could get that for and so you see how what started with one medicine that I really didn't need to take long term now has another and another and another. And it's possible to go from 1 or 2 medicines over the course of 10 to 20 years to 12 to 15 to even 20 medicines per day. Unfortunately, I'm seeing those lists of medicines, like you said, get much longer. I helped someone who had 40 different medicines they were taking per day.
Oh my
And
God.
I felt this sense of empathy and compassion for them because they were so upset about, I'm taking all this. And the word that they used was, I feel like a prisoner. I feel like a prisoner because I have to time it just right with this medicine, and I can't take it 2 hours within this other medication. And it's like this has become a full-time job. This person was only in their lower 60s, right? And it was clear that they were sick of it and they wanted to break free of it. But the challenge is it takes years to get to that point, and it takes years to get away from it. And I think one of the things we had talked a little bit about is being able to recognize it early enough to do something about it. And then how pharmacists oftentimes get called in to dose escalate by a physician or put someone on a medication. But we almost never get used in practice to deprescribe or take somebody off a medication. So taking people off of medicines is something that a pharmacist would be qualified to help with. There should be a doctor's involvement, obviously, because you have to do all these monitorings and whatnot, but the pharmacist could be used in that way. But where's the impetus to do that? And I think ultimately, from a pharmacist's perspective, our job satisfaction tends to not be very high in a conventional pharmacy, brick and mortar. So somewhere like a Walgreens or CVS or Rite Aid, the pharmacist is basically an assembly line worker. I was even told at one point, pharmacists are better seen and not heard. Yes, that's a thing. And we go through a lot. And I'm actually married to a pharmacist, and SETI is the joy and love of my life. We met in pharmacy school, and she's well aware of this polypharmacy concept. But just working in that environment, right? And at one point, actually, I think we've both gone through this. So you call a doctor and you question a medicine, right? Or you question a dose, like that might be too high. And the pushback you get is unlike anything. You know,
Yes.
somebody attacking and, well, why do you say that? And you can't question me. I am the doctor, I'm the physician, right? And I think that if we had a collaborative partnership between pharmacists and physicians in an agreement that for some of these medication classes, if the patient says, oh, I want to be off of it, then we don't try to discourage them. We try to work with them. We try to empower them. Okay, you don't want to take it anymore, or there are natural remedies out there. There's so many herbs that we can choose from. But then let's work with you to help get off the medicine in a very safe way, in a very sustainable way. Versus, I think what some people do, and unfortunately this is to their detriment, is they'll go and say, I'm so fed up with it. I don't want to take any more pills. Tomorrow, I'm stopping everything. And unfortunately, I've helped a fair number of folks that were either in hypertensive crisis because of that.
Yeah.
They're losing their mind because they were on antidepressants for years and now they're coming off cold turkey.
Oof.
And the body can adapt to just about anything. It's very resilient. But why put yourself through more pain than you need to? So this is where I think pharmacists could expand the scope, could expand their practice, have a little bit more professional satisfaction. I will say I've had more professional satisfaction at the herbal path than I ever had in a retail pharmacy. And if you had told me 10, 20 years ago that I would be doing what I'm doing today, I would say, what? Because I just had this image of being in the pharmacy, helping patients, counseling people, getting to know people, but just being active, right? Being involved. I always wanted to be involved, and I never was able to do that. And if I did, I'd get close to it, and then there'd be some sort of corporate initiative that we had to follow up on. But here it's different. Here we have a number of folks that we know by name, that we've kind of helped or supported throughout the years. We have people, families that come to us. And it honestly feels to me, even though it's not, it feels to me more like a community pharmacy than an actual community pharmacy. And maybe that's just the vision or the purpose mission that I had in my mind, but it's just a really remarkable thing. So I think polypharmacy is a very easy trap to fall into. I empathize with people that feel like taking medicine is their full-time job. And I believe that pharmacists and other practitioners are capable of doing more, but are trapped in a system that will not let them. And we need to help them break out of that system. Because why is this important? Because of what we've already talked about, chronic disease. If we keep going in this rate, where are we going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And it's baffling to me because we are so much smarter technically than we were 20, 30 years ago, but yet we're further away from nature. The further away human beings get from nature, the more that there are these long-term health-related consequences. There's something soothing about walking through a forest. There's something soothing about gardening or working with the soil. We're meant to be connected to the earth. And when we lose that and we just look for answers in a lab, I think we're kind of missing an aspect of humanity. So this polypharmacy, it's certainly grown over the years. Unfortunately, it appears it's going to continue to grow. And that's why I'm very passionate about getting out there and speaking about it and how pharmacists could get involved with helping their patients maybe streamline some of the medicines that they're taking. And I'll give you an example. There was a person who came in here. They were seeing multiple doctors, not because they wanted to, but because their insurance was saying you have to, right? It's not like people set out and say, oh, I want to see 3 different doctors.
No, they want one.
They want one good one. But sometimes insurance, they're kind of like pulling the strings for people.
Yeah.
Right. And oftentimes the executives in that branch don't have medical education, but yet they're the ones in charge. But anyway, so someone comes in, they've got a list. I look through the list. And the first thing I notice is they're on 3 different acid blocking medications, right?
Oh, yeah.
3 different ones. One of them, the doctor prescribed, the first doctor. The second one was kind of an adjuvant to the first one, is prescribed by a different doctor. And the third one was actually the patient's decision because they're like, these 2 just didn't work for my heartburn. So I thought maybe I need to try a different one. So if Protonix isn't working, let me buy Nexium over the counter, because you can now, you can buy them over the counter. And so it was famotidine, Nexium, pantoprazole, or Protonix. And that's 3 medicines that virtually do the same thing.
Wow.
So we were able to say, wait, this could be a problem. Let's let the doctor know. The doctor, of course, wasn't aware. They're like, well, wow, no, that shouldn't be happening, right? That's therapeutic duplication. So again, some of it is just waking people up to there's these things to watch for, and we might be able to do something with 1 versus 3, or 1 versus 6, right? So there's the empowerment factor, right? And that's the other thing that came out of that is the client or the patient is like, wow, okay, I can be involved. I can have a voice. And I'm encouraged that so many younger people right now seem to want to know more about their health and are interested and are seeking preventative measures, alternative medicines, ways to be healthier, make good choices for their body. And I think having that mindset of you need to be your best advocate for health and wellness, you can't outsource that. That's encouraging to see. So I do think that the conditions are shifting a little, starting to see more awareness, but I would love to see pharmacists more involved with deprescribing. I think everybody would benefit from that.
Absolutely. And now we will take a short break from our episode to share an offering that will take your healing to a whole new level. How would it feel to stress less, feel more spaciousness in your body, all while reducing physical symptoms? I can tell you from personal experience, it's one of the most empowering and freeing experiences one can have. Rebel Remembered is a year-long journey using goddess archetypes, body wisdom, and ancient modalities to bring a level of health to your body unlike anything else. As a Chinese medicine practitioner, it has always been clear to me that the emotional body is at the root of physical symptoms in the body. This program is truly holistic, addressing physical symptoms by exploring spiritual and emotional themes, much like this episode. This opportunity only opens once a year, so be sure to get on the waiting list for when enrollment opens this fall. The link is in the show notes. And now, back to the show. Well, and the pharmacist serves as like a singular, I'm going to call it a balance point, right? Because the way that our healthcare model is set up, it's very siloed. You have a doctor for your throat, you have a doctor for your gastrointestinal, you have a doctor for, you know what I mean? And because the body gets pulled apart into all of these silos or buckets, you sometimes make it to the physician before your medical records get there. So if the client is trying to rattle off all of their stuff off the top of their head, they might miss something that might be in the chart that didn't follow them or didn't get there in time, right? Because it's a huge machine. So this is where I think there's a beautiful opportunity for the pharmacist to be that central balance point going, hey, you've had these multiple practitioners that essentially are looking at something similar, right? You have this set of symptoms. They're all trying to do their best to come up with a solution to help you
Mhm.
feel better. However, because you've got multiple voices in the conversation, it's no different than trying to make a decision of where you're going to go to dinner with four people in the room, right? Everybody's going to have a different
We all
opinion.
know how that goes. Yeah.
Everybody has a different opinion, right?
Yes.
And they have a different perspective and they bring a different narrative to the conversation. So, this is where the pharmacist, it would be so beautiful for pharmacists to be able to help with this deprescribing idea
Mhm.
because that's what I see a lot in medication lists. And because of the role that I play, I am not in a regulated licensed discipline. So I will encourage them to go back to their provider. But then sometimes the question is, well, which one?
Yeah, that's common. And that's tough because when you think about it, the one thing that I've noticed with some of the people we're helping, none of them say, oh, or very few of them say, I don't want to have a relationship with my provider. But almost all of them say, I never get enough time with my doctor.
Yes.
And I think it's a common thing now for the doctor. And I'm trying to think about it from the physician's perspective, because you always try to put yourself in other people's shoes.
Right.
And I think that it could be very frustrating for them having limited time with people, having to see more patients than they've ever seen in a day before. In some cases, 30, 40 patients a day, write detailed soap notes on what those patients are taking, what
Yeah.
updates they've made, and then have questions being presented. They just physically don't have time anymore.
Mhm.
But yet, patients have more questions now than they ever have before because maybe they're trying to be more informed or come off of a medication or can I take an herb or can I take a supplement? So it's very common that folks will come in kind of frustrated, like, oh, I really wish I had more time with my doctor, but I don't get that. It's really the system that is mitigating that. It's not the doctor saying, oh, I don't want to spend time with people. They do.
Yes.
They really do. But I think the challenge is if you have this overarching organization saying, you got to be faster. You got to be faster. And I absolutely know how it feels. I went through the same thing in pharmacy where time was so important. Like every second mattered. And literally, if you come up for air from verifying prescriptions for like 2 minutes, you could be behind by hours, right? So you just have to be so in the zone and so focused. And unfortunately, when you get to that point, it's almost like a distraction. People present or questions present as a distraction because you have to get in the zone and get your job done, or what? Or you get in trouble, right? Or your boss speaks to you, or why aren't you going faster? And I think when we go too fast, we miss things. And we can miss that human aspect of patient care that is so important for someone who is not well, who is sick, who is struggling with chronic disease, who's trying to help a loved one navigate through their chronic condition. They're so confused too. You think about it with like a new diagnosis of cancer. If somebody just gets diagnosed with that is a life altering diagnosis, they have all these questions, right? They don't want to be ushered very quickly through a system, put on a whole bunch of different medicines and not given very clear explanations. So I think the one common theme that I see from people is they wish they had more time with their physician, but instead of getting more, they're actually getting less. And it's not a physician thing, it's the system is doing this. And I think I said in the beginning, there's two parts of medicine, right, that I've observed. One of them is kind of like the softer side, patient care, empathy, let's help the patients, all the really good stuff that you or I as practitioners would embrace. And then there's the machine like version of medicine, which is get them in, get them out, take a number, don't have insurance, next. And it's unfortunately, automated systems are getting brought in more and more. And I think right now, due to the fact that patients might not be given enough time with their doctor. They're craving those human connections and their time starved, their human connections. So you've got that, the perfect storm, if you would, for, is there another way? Are there other choices? And I believe that there are. And I think that, what does the ideal look like? The ideal looks like more collaboration. So what you said, right, where you've got the pharmacist actively working with the physician, but add in an herbalist. There are hospitals out there that actually have a clinical herbalist. I thought it was so cool. The University of Vermont Medical Center actually employs clinical herbalists. Wouldn't it be neat if all mainstream medical practices had that resource available for people?
That would be amazing because that's actually where me as a practitioner, I get a lot of pushback. I've always been like, I'm happy to talk with your doctor, explain what it is that I have going on, but it's essentially what you're talking about. They don't have the time. I've had a few curious physicians, and those have been some of the richest conversations I've ever had. But a lot of times when I make suggestions and they take it back to their doctor goes, "Oh no, well, we can't possibly do that." And it's not necessarily that the doctor isn't open to the idea because outside of the office, a lot of them are very open to holistic approaches to healthcare. But it's more the fact that there's so much medical malpractice insurance that they have to carry. If they make a recommendation, there's a liability aspect to it. And if they don't understand it, it ends up being essentially on their license and their professional reputation and their ability to practice. And so I find that there's a lot of pushback, but that comes back to the system that you're talking about, right? Sure.
Yes, it 100% is. And I think I did a talk recently for New Hampshire Urban Garden Day, and it was about the history of pharmacy. And what's fascinating about it is we come from an origin of using botanicals in mainstream medicine. And at some point, we got our hands slapped and we were told, no, we can't use botanicals anymore. And we had to go in a different direction. But there are different programs being developed right now by mainstream universities that target functional medicine in an understanding, albeit a limited one, of botanicals and where they fall. And some of these programs are actually now waitlisted. There's that much interest. So what do we do, right? So we say, okay, the system is broken, doom and gloom. And I'm not a doom and gloom kind of person, right? So I always look for, where is the solution? Because it's one thing to say, oh, the sky's falling, but okay, what do we do now?
Right.
And I think that the answer is the students. Because from what I have seen, the pharmacy students, because we have a program with the pharmacy college, we bring pharmacy students into the herbal path to do some training.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't
And
know that, John.
that's why I'm at the herbal path. I was one of those students.
I love that.
And when they come in, they're always kind of like interesting, skeptical, eyebrows get raised. And by the end of it, they're totally different. And just seeing that transformation of thought, seeing the transformation of openness, right? Like the mindset changes over the course of 6 weeks. It's a beautiful thing. And that's really where the solution comes from. If the students and the practitioners of the future learn about the different ways of doing things, what do you think they're going to recommend when they get out there? If someone comes in, oh, this medicine isn't working for me, but I'm not really sure. Could I try lion's mane? Can I try medicinal mushroom? If you don't know what that is, like you said, you're not going to recommend it because what if it's dangerous, right?
Exactly.
But if you are someone who's been trained in it, who has a good understanding of it, who knows that it's not going to cause harm, then you can have a conversation with someone about it. So the students are the key. The generation of the future, that is really what I've seen. And I'll give you an example. We had a pharmacy student who was here not too long ago, and now they just sent me an email and they were basically saying something like, I love the fact that I was able to come to a place and literally change my mindset about plants and about herbs. And now I'm actually starting to recommend them in the pharmacy. And that for me was like, wow, warm, fuzzy feeling all over, because that's why we do this. We're trying to help impact the profession and the generation of the future. Because we're not going to solve this overnight. Like I said at the beginning, it took years to get here. It will
Mhm.
take years to get away from it. But I do think the students are the key, or a big part of it in any respect.
I got goosebumps from that, John. That is the transformation that we want to see in the future. It's the whole reason I have a practitioner program as well, is I want to be able to bring these ancient modalities that have literally been used for thousands of years back into the forefront so that people realize that they have choices. And there, like I said earlier, there are a lot of practitioners that when they're open to having an initial conversation with me, they are totally open to co-create
Mm.
and collaborate with me. I have this huge book that sits in my office, Chinese medicine and, how it works with pharmaceuticals and that type of thing, because you'll see a lot of med lists and you need to be aware as an herbalist. So this is something that like I want to actually chime in as an herbalist because I'll see people who are like, "Oh, this herb will work for this thing," right? That's that whole pill for a symptom kind of idea.
Yes.
And they'll come in and they will have put themselves on a bunch of herbs, not realizing that their St. John's wort and their SSRI really do not play well with one another. So these are plants generally have very minimal side effects. However, when you're working with pharmaceuticals, you need to know what kinds of interactions there could potentially be between the actions of the medication and the actions of the herb itself. You're generally going to see fewer side effects on the herb, but it doesn't mean that they can't coexist in somebody's repertory either. But it requires going to somebody with your level of training, with a clinical herbalist level of training to be able to say, okay, how can we not only minimize this
Mm.
list, but have everybody singing from the same sheet of music? Because this kind of synergistic relationship between can completely exist. But it's a matter of being able to have those kinds of very rich conversations in spaces like the herbal path, where you get to make that bridge between what people are receiving in the insurance, I'm going to call it the insurance bearing model, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
so many people are like, I pay thousands of dollars for my insurance. I might as well use it, even though they
Mhm.
have high deductibles and all of these kinds of things. And it does cost out of pocket. And you and I talked a little bit offline about this, but there's an out of pocket investment when you go a more holistic route because in a large part insurance companies haven't risen to that level of the conversation yet where people are saying, well, I would love to be able to do something a little more holistic, but my insurance doesn't cover it. And when I went through herbal school, I had the privilege of learning with one of the best in the industry, Michael Tierra. And one statement that he made over and over again during class is herbs are the medicine of the people. And he truly believed in herbal medicine being accessible for people. And I know that we could make this into an entire conversation and maybe we will another day, but being able to have these kinds of collaborative conversations with people with your expertise, with clinical herbalists, and looking at the entire person rather than having it be a sum of parts, which is very much how the conventional model works. And I have deep empathy as well for the provider side of things because I care for some of these providers who are experiencing burnout because they're in this need to stay hyper focused, their days are long, and they're people with hearts that
Yes.
started in this profession because they just wanted to help people. And
Yes.
it's the system that isn't working for them. So I love and it's the reason why I'm moving towards being able to speak at colleges and universities as well is because I agree with you. It does start with the students and this next generation of people coming through. And just from my experience, I am very pleasantly surprised, inspired, hopeful for the next generation because I have teen girls come through my practice now that are aware of how their cycles work. They're not ashamed of being bleeding bodies, which is a complete mindset shift from generations prior to that, where you had a period. It was like that seen and not heard situation, right? Like
Right,
you're
right,
having a
exactly.
period, but nobody should know, and you should be able to work like you don't have one, and all of this kind of stuff. And there's this shift, this mindset shift. And it comes back to what you were saying about understanding and wanting and desiring to be empowered about whole body wellness. I want to know how to be able to care for this vessel that I'm moving through the world in. What are my options? And that's the whole reason this program exists, is I want people to know
Mhm.
that they have options. I want to have conversations just like this that talk about the conventional model and I'm going to call it the alternative model, but really like it's becoming more and more mainstream and less alternative, which I think is a beautiful thing. But, I think that people who are listening, knowing that they have choices, they can ask questions, and who they can go to for those questions, which is why I thought it was so important to have you on the show, John, is that I don't think a lot of people realize they could go to a pharmacist and ask some of these questions.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, and I think that's true. Knowing who to go to, where to go. I've had folks come in before saying stuff like, "Oh, well, I'm going to ask my doctor about these mushrooms," right? And I'll just use reishi mushroom as an example, Ganoderma lucidum. It's an amazing mushroom, has been used for thousands of years in traditional Chinese medicine for a wide variety of different health-related conditions. So it has a history of medical use in these cultures, and it's a rich and ancient tradition of use. And I had this person I won't forget came in and said, "Oh, this sounds amazing." I even took them behind the counter and showed them like the dried reishi mushroom that we have behind the counter because I just love mushrooms, right? But they weren't quite, something wasn't jiving for them, which I totally understand. It's everyone comes to their place in time. So I said, "Okay, sure, go ask your doctor. They're probably not going to know a lot about it, but definitely do." And I guess they went to the doctor, and the doctor said something like, "Well, I don't know what that is, but we know that supplements don't have enough data, so just don't take any of them." Right. And I'm sure they said it a little differently, but that's in essence what they told this person. And they ended up coming back and saying, "Well, I did my own research, and through the conversation I had with you, learned that reishi is something that I really want to try. So how do I start that?" So it's not, the doctors are really smart. They know a lot about diagnosing. That's how they're trained. What condition do you have? What lab values do we look at? How do we dig into these parameters? But when it comes to supplements, when it comes to herbs, when it comes to medicinal mushrooms, unfortunately, they didn't get schooling on that. So if you're not trained on something, how will you know it? If I had not come to the herbal path and done the pharmacy rotation and learned a lot about herbs and also pursued my own studies as well, I probably wouldn't know anything about reishi mushroom either. So I think it's knowing where to go. And that's why I keep going back to, I think this collaborative piece is so important. So I'm blessed that I get to work with herbalists. And let's say, for example, an herbalist is going to do a consultation. There's almost always a list of pharmaceuticals involved. So they'll come to me, we'll sit down, we'll have a conversation about, okay, these are the medications, this is what they do, what supplements can we not use? We're going to screen to make sure that anything we recommend is not going to cause more harm than good. It's very important to do that because once you add pharmaceuticals, right? So plants are very gentle, right? Typically, but once you add pharmaceuticals, you fundamentally alter metabolism. There's more going on now in the liver. There's more going on now in the kidneys, right? So what you don't want to do is inadvertently slow down the breakdown of some of those medicines and have them build up in the body, because that's where some of the negative effects can come from. Not from the plants, but if the plants have to go through the same metabolic enzymes that are taking care of the medicine, where is the medicine going to go? And that's why I think a pharmacist and an herbalist working together is so valuable, because we've had the training and we can support people on the journey, right? And I also am a firm believer in empowering people to learn on their own too. And I think this is the biggest challenge. So if I want to go out there and learn about herbs and about supplements, the internet can be both a beautiful and scary, terrifying place all at once, because I can pretty much find anything, but I can also find anything. And there's a lot of myths going on online right now, ways to use herbs. I just heard one yesterday that blew my mind, that lemon balm was 5 times more effective than Ozempic, right, for weight loss. And the data that's being based on is one study that's in a mouse model where they took one alkaloid in lemon balm and force fed it to mice, right? So I think it's understanding for people, where can I go for reputable information and how do I evaluate literature? And we try hard to empower people to do that. But take some time to read through the weeds and like a study. There can be a lot of minutia and statistics, and some of that takes practice and nuance to tease out. But I'm always a firm believer in learning from a good herbalist, right? So someone such as yourself, or Misty Meadows is a great resource. I send people there all the time because we've even had people kind of work for us, work for them, back and forth. But they are a center of education where they take time to show, okay, these are how the herbs are grown. This is what they're traditionally used for, not, oh, this herb is cool, take a bunch of it for high blood pressure, right? There's more to the story than that.
Absolutely. I love Wendy. She's awesome.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think that what you said is really important, in that there needs to be more of that kind of collaborative conversation around, and you said it beautifully. And I hope people really focus. I mean, yes, this whole conversation is very rich, but I think that the piece that you just said about how things metabolize is such a critical piece that people don't think about,
Mhm.
because maybe you can find a study, but it's not done here in the United States. And you're like, oh, well, but there's this literature that backs this thing. And so I'm going to do this thing. That
Mhm.
is wonderful. However, what you said about the kidneys and the liver, I see it a lot. And it's not just
Mhm.
because I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner and I feel like kidneys and liver is like the world that I work in most of the time, but how those pharmaceuticals and those herbs will be processed through your body. Are there things that are compromising the processing of these things that will change the way they express themselves in their body is critically important. So it may not be that this herb is not safe for breastfeeding. It may be that this herb is fine for breastfeeding. However, because of something else that you're taking,
Mhm.
it might not be a good idea for you. And so this is the part, as an herbalist anyway, I always come into the conversation and I go, every body is unique. And whether that uniqueness comes from the fact that, yes, there's general pattern recognition in Chinese medicine, for example, that I can put general templates together. You have XYZ symptom, you probably are yang deficient or you're yin deficient. Great. But the piece that really does tailor and customize how you work with somebody is, well, what else are you taking?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's supplements. Like I've had people come in with, I'm taking 5-HTP for this, and I'm taking B vitamins, and I'm taking this other thing, I'm taking, and they're doing a lot of synthetic supplements, but they're also taking a thyroid medication. They're also taking fill in the blank. And not only have they tried to self supplement in a really long list, because they do really crave going a more holistic way, and they've pieced together information like, oh, if I take beef thyroid, it's going to help my thyroid function. Well, while those things may be true, what else are you also taking? What else is part of this equation? And this is where people who have expertise like you do can help you take this list of things and distill it down into, well, what does your body actually need? How many of these things are being redundant, like you were talking about? And this can happen from the supplement side, not just the pharmaceutical side. And then the interplay between the two. I think it's beautiful that you're able to work in such a synergistic relationship with herbalists, because as people do want to move in this more holistic direction, and I see lots of them, that whether they're coming to me or it's just listening to people talk around a campfire and conversation, like there are people that do want to emancipate themselves from their long lists of medications and they try to like go it alone.
And if you go it alone, you're probably going to be, I think we said in the beginning, something about pushing a boulder up a hill.
Yes.
And it's a great analogy because I've seen it where someone will come in, they want to white knuckle it. They're like, I'm going to go on an 8-week or 6-week intensive cleanse. Give me your strongest cleanse, and I'm going to take chlorophyll and Celtic salt and castor oil, like you wouldn't
I've seen
believe.
this too.
And I'm going to be healthy at the end of this 8 weeks, right? And what that is, that's someone who is kind of had enough, right? They're frustrated. They're to the point where they're just throwing back their hands and saying, that's it. I'm just going it alone. I know I've done my research, white knuckle it, boulder up the hill. And unfortunately, what happens is they're going to start really strong. They always do. But by week 4, they're really going to start dragging, right? Maybe even sooner with some of the stuff that's out there. But if you have support, if you have someone who is kind of a coach, if you would, right? The best teams that win, what is the commonality? They have a good coach. So someone who is kind, understanding, knows when to push you when you need it. I think that's invaluable. And a good coach could be a good herbalist, right? Because what does an herbalist do? I think at the most basic premise, an herbalist is like a matchmaker. They are matching the right plant to the right person. And it's like you said, it's not a one size fits all approach. And somebody who has a very warm constitution, who's flushed and hot all the time, should they be taking turmeric and ginger and cayenne pepper and all these like fiery herbs if they're inflamed? No, probably not, right? You could help them pick cooling herbs or things that are better for their individual constitution. So, like you said, every body is unique. And this is, I think, the main benefit in working with an herbalist or working with a coach is they're going to help you cut the learning curve and not make so many mistakes on your own, right? Because life is short. And health, we're trying to get healthy as soon as we can. It is obviously a journey. But if you're able to cut that learning curve and learn from someone who's done it before or who is trained to offer suitable guidance, that can be a much more fulfilling and sustainable experience than just going full tilt on chlorophyll, castor oil, Celtic salt cleanses. And I just mentioned those because we've had our fair share of kind of the fad, if you would, where people come in and at one point we couldn't keep Celtic salt in stock. People were coming in, they were drinking it, they were eating it. And I think this is where, again, information is very accessible online, which is great, but so is misinformation.
Yes.
And it's really important if you're going to do a cleanse or you're going to put your body into a state that requires hardship, that you have someone supporting you, is what I would say.
Yes, beautiful. So, as you can see, I could talk to John for hours. I hope that we can do another episode, my friend. This has been such an incredible conversation and one that I think is really needed because there's a lot of conversation around a lot of these topics. And these are the kinds of conversations that spread hope for the future, that lay the foundation for this education and this collaboration that you're talking about, that will help move the needle in a healthier, more synergistic direction in the future. So if people wanted to get a hold of you, John, how could they reach you?
Yeah. So I would say the Herbal Path, right, is my base of operations. We have a website, www.herbalpath.com. There's multiple informations there about our stores, our philosophy, our mission, vision, purpose, and what it all means. And you could call the store, you can email. I would also say, too, if you're looking for support with herbal remedies or you want to do one of these types of deep dives and consultative work, that an herbalist might be better than working directly with me. I'm certainly going to be involved helping to support medication use and appropriate utilization of medication. But ultimately, working with a good herbalist, and that we have several, might be more in line with what you need. So at the very least, come check us out. We're a space of education and healing, And I'm very hopeful and happy that we're starting to see more awareness develop within the community. I think that the more we can have these collaborative conversations, I love the idea of coming back to talk again about other health-related topics. I'm always a fan. So I do want to thank you for having me on the show today.
Thank you so much for joining us, John. And until next time, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist, Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at MoonEssenceMe on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.